It's time for a little bit of clickbait here as it's collapsing. Well, it actually is collapsing, so that is not necessarily inaccurate. But what is collapsing is the real question of the day, and that would be the dollar index. So we were looking at a major pullback off of the, I believe it was, what was it, 107? Yeah, about 107 region. And well, that pullback had a potential to be a macro reversal. In this case, it looks like we're coming into the conditions or very close to the conditions where that would actually be confirmed. So without further ado, I want to get back to that, maybe link it back into Bitcoin as well, and maybe even follow up on some Bitcoin dominance here too. And other than that, I'm going to walk you back to the Krown Crypto channel. It's a nice little Saturday morning. It's a Saturday morning, and I'm tired as hell, but it's all good. So let's just jump into the charts right in over here. And first things first, we'll start off with Dixie on the weekly. So again, throwing on our drawing tools, this was the big bad area of extremely likelihood for a pullback for potentially a macro reversal. And we were entertaining the possibility of that if we start to see weekly closures, specifically below about $1.04. When we start to see below about 104. I would at the very least be looking for this to enter into a long-term macro range. Well, the same range that it's essentially been operating in. Let me actually throw on my bottom blue box. There we go. For the bottom side of that range, somewhere down here, somewhere down around here as I stutter my way through this one between about 110 cents to 101, like a dollar range, basically, just playing ping pong between these two major regions right here, well, could it even have a continuation on top of that? Definitely possible long term, but I'd still kind of say the same thing. It's like, want to see one thing before the next. So in this case, as this weekly does get ready to set in, or actually already has set in, I'd still want to see maybe one more closure below the 104 region, but ultimately it's looking very, 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 very likely at this point, and maybe I'm being a little bit too conservative here, that it does play back down, to the lower 100s at the very minimum. Weekly time frame is showing several things as far as our indicators go. We do see that the weekly RSI is a clean and clear rejection of the bullish control zone here. Again, as far as the RSI goes, I would be looking for it to come somewhere back down around, where's my damn brush? There's my damn brush. I'd be looking for it to come somewhere down around here. Maybe not all in the same move. There's going to be bounces along the way, obviously, but ultimately, base around the edge of the bearish control zone first, and then try for a bounce. And then if it is going to be a macro breakdown, you'll see something like that. So, it could be like a bounce along the way, blah, 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 blah. You get the idea. It's going to take some time. These are higher term time frames after all. Also of significance here is that the weekly which did close, did paint in the jewel turning to the, not just continuing to the downside, but also now supported by DMI. So this is becoming a much more powerful signal. Again, probably going to see a bounce somewhere around this region right here, so relatively soon. But assuming that bounce just doesn't reclaim 106 region, it's just that, a bounce before further continuations to the downside. So here's the thing. Why are we even talking about Dixie? Well, a lot of people have this idea that the dollar index plays opposite to risk on assets, which in some cases it does. It really plays opposite to, a basket of other fiat currencies is what it's actually more accurate with. But we do see, some correlations, or I should say negative correlations between the dollar index and, specifically stocks, which are on the edge of, at least I believe, a macro breakout. As we've been looking at over here, both NASDAQ and SPY, two of the major bourses for the U.S. markets, putting in macro higher lows and getting ready for, lift off, at least in the way they look at things. So ultimately, Dixie continuing to head down probably benefits those. And if you believe in the stock market correlation to Bitcoin correlation, then maybe that helps out Bitcoin as well. Although I would argue that's certainly less well tested. But hey, for the correlation believers out there, this would be something for you, I suppose. Anyways, more to the topic, we can see over here that let me go back to the weekly time frame for the stochastic oscillator is going to continue to the downside for Dixie, and also potentially lose the bullish control zone on this next closure. So not this current one, but the one next week, assuming that things do continue below about a $1.0685 region. You can also see this this trendline regression coming in pretty much exactly where it's going to open up on Monday. So, bounce relatively soon if there is going to be one. But once we start to see closures below this region, yeah, okay, that's just yet another thing that does suggest, alongside the other tools that we've looked at, that it very likely comes to the to the bottoms of the range. And personally speaking, I do think that it very likely will. I think maybe I'm offering a little bit more of a conservative view right now, just for the fucks of it. But yes, anyways, also the monthly time frame over here, we're seeing volatility actually really expand above 50 percentile for the first time since, December 2021. Again, volatility is direction neutral, but just to kind of imply the sort of severity of the move, that was this move over here where, Dixie really broke out and put in that, 23% rally, to its current high for, 2022, this past cycle. Which is a big move for Dixie, not in cryptocurrency terms, obviously, but for Dixie, that's a humongous move. So, we're likely looking at some big over here. That is why I do say that ultimately this does have the markings of a potential macro breakdown, or at least a play back down to the bottom side of the macro range. Anyways, yes, now that we've gone through that, let's go over here to Bitcoin. Let's look at Bitcoin on the HPDR bands. Yesterday, we were saying, hey, as long as Bitcoin's above $36,000, hopium still remains for the BULAs in the more short term, but Bitcoin continues to hold above it valiantly. 36,350 going to be the current trading price. Yesterday's closure 36,627. So not bad right there. But I would say that this still does look weak to me, just personally, just looking at it. Not that that's like anything objective to be going off of, but of course, now that the HPDR bands have shifted around a little bit, coming off this new closure, the current bottom side is basically a little bit lower than yesterday's low at about 35,700, implying that closures below there, yeah, we probably do see a return back onto the bottom side of the overall range, which should be around low $33,000. So I'm actually going to paint that in here with my trusty little rectangle, something like this. Something like that. Again, assuming that Bitcoin closed below 35.7, over this weekend, or between now and like Monday, let's say. Until then, I suppose hopium does still remain for the BULAs in the short term for maybe another try to the upside. Personally speaking, like I said, I do look at this as a little bit weaker here. It doesn't look super strong. We can look at CME as well. CME actually does paint a stronger picture, still holding above the median. But, if it even just trades below the low of Friday, I'd really be looking for it to come back down to the bottoms of the range. This looks more rangy to me than not. But again, just going by visual view is not objective. And well, that's why I don't trade like that. I use these tools over here. I like trading based off statistics and probabilities, not my fucking stupid opinion, which is subject to change very often and also be wrong very often too. Anyways, speaking about being wrong, I did want to, for the sake of transparency, go over here to the 4-hour Oracle signal that we did call out. It was on Wednesday after a slew of actually a lot of really, really good signals. This one certainly a loser, coughing up the gains almost as soon as it did fire off. So ultimately, not great in this case, but as we don't expect things to work out for forever, obviously. But for right now, this was a closing signal over here, so there's not really anything new to be speaking about or to do. Just kind of perusing the different time frames. I suspect same shit. Actually, the 6-hour is still in it, to be fair. 12-hour never left it. It's still long from down here, and I think the daily same thing as well. But this has been a pretty damn long one, so I would still kind of say that plays into the idea that Bitcoin goes into more of a range overall, basically between the highs at 38 and the lows at like 33, let's say, then continuation from here. But and that also plays hand in hand with the statistics that we looked at for the volatility versus stochastic momentum setup. That does suggest that this current move is, statistically speaking, it's very close to the end of it. Maybe this next week there's one more try, but as we did say, middle of November, probably the end of this move, and we're now past the middle of November. Anyways, also I wanted to follow up on one last thing while we're here, Bitcoin dominance. So Bitcoin dominance, we were looking at a very likely bounce around the 52% region. Right here, and that is indeed happening. Now, the question is, how high does this bounce get? Because this is going to be the next big puzzle piece as to whether this is, potential macro reversal, with 54% about as the highs, and this one comes back down significantly below 50%, or if this was just the next higher low, because this is where you would expect the next higher low exactly right here on that 55 exponential as the as the daily RSI does reject the bearish control zone, and we do see the daily jewel start to turn up as well. So for right now, the ball is in the Bitcoin dominance Bulaw's court. How would they essentially confirm that this is going to continue upwards and onwards? Well, very simply put, just back above last week's high, which is about 53.75. Was this last week? The Thursday the 9th. I think that was last week. Let me actually I don't know why I hear that much about. Yeah, it was last week. Okay, it was last week. It's like I need to know what fucking week it is. It matters. It doesn't matter that much. But basically 35.75 or so. If we start to see closures above there, especially on a weekly, no, this is not going to be a macro reversal, and Bitcoin dominance will continue to rise. And I will be wrong about the idea that 54% will be the next potential macro high. But for right now, still very much possible. Definitely depends how I would suspect like this next week or two goes. But for right now, actually holding in there and kind of doing what you would expect if it is going to continue. So we got the bounce, or we're getting the bounce right now. The question is, how high does the bounce come? Anywhere below 53.75, okay, then big bad problem for this. But for right now, still probably some more upside. So probably some more pain for altcoin Bitcoin pairings. Actually, to that point, I'm just curious to see what Ethereum Bitcoin's looking like. Actually, I haven't checked on this before this video. Yeah, coughing up the rally right there, definitely. Coming back down around these lows, very very likely. But does it set in a higher low? Maybe this chart might this chart perhaps a little bit easier to read than the other one. But yeah, anything above like 5.2 million satoshis is would be a higher low and would be fair game. But for right now, short term, a little bit of downside. And of course, in this case, a very easy way to call a macro reversal is back above, what was this, last week's high, 5.8 million satoshis, anywhere above there. Sorry, it's not a macro reversal, but very likely it's going to play back up north of 6 million satoshis, probably closer to like 6.5 million satoshis. And that would be a great insight into what Bitcoin dominance is likely doing as well. I suspect that those play kind of hand in hand. So something to be aware of in this coming next week to 2 week spread. I think that's a good place for me to be leaving off on this particular video, however. And with that said, I want to be wishing you the best as always. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully Sunday.